There.
All right, that was that video.
Morning, everyone. Morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and the time is 10:08. And I'd like to call the meeting to order of the West Haven Subcommittee of the MARB. It is September the 20th, and we are on site today for the first time in a long time. Actually, my first time on site. So welcome, everybody. Glad to see everybody's faces after such a long time. And today, the first item of business, well, as far as opening remarks this morning, I'd like to want to thank everybody for being here and making the travels, those that had to make the travels. That was a little challenging this morning for some of us, such as myself, but also to let the members know that we do need to end today sharply at 12. We do have a subcommittee meeting, another meeting immediately after that with West Haven, and that's for our staff. So I do want to make sure that we're conscious of our time today. I'd like to hand it over to my co-chair and Christine, see if you have any opening remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Kennison, and good morning, everyone. It really is nice to be in West Haven, so thank you. I appreciate the city hosting us in their council chambers, and look forward to continuing the work of getting the finances back on track. So turn it over to you, Ms. Kennison.
Thank you, Christine. All right, the first item on the agenda today will be the approval of the minutes. It's July 26th, the regular meeting. If hopefully those minutes are in the packet, and looking for a motion for approval, please.
So move.
Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion? I hear none. All right, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. All right, the minutes have been approved.
I'm very sorry.
Excuse me?
Mr. White, dial in?
Yes.
He's up.
He's over.
Aye.
Morning.
Morning.
You know everybody. Yeah, Julian has a roll call.
Everybody's here. Everybody on the committee is present.
Very good. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is to review and to discuss the possible action of a labor contract for the Board of Education of West Haven Administration Association. The Board of Ed, this contract covers about 23 Board of Ed principals and other administrators. And the current contract for this group expires on August 31st of 2023, or did expire, and no, next year. And the Board of Ed and the union have reached a tentative agreement for the contract with a term of September the 1st, 23 to run through August the 31st of 2026. The Board of Ed has provided a summary of this agreement and some fiscal analysis comparables, as well as a red line copy of the contract. The Board of Ed has provided an overview of this contract. We're going to ask them to please give an update to this group.
Our attorney, Floyd Dugas, is on the line. I'll turn it over to him to discuss the contract.
Floyd?
Okay, thank you. Attorney Floyd Dugas from the law firm Birch and Moses here. I apologize, I can't be in there in person. I had a conflict at the same time this morning. I think the most important thing to point out about this contract is, and I believe this has been provided to you all, when we go into contract negotiations, we always look at where salaries compare to the market. And this is one of the most extraordinary examples that I've ever seen of that. The salaries for this group are nearly 20% below the market of comparable town boards of ed in comparable towns and cities. And part of that is this group has taken multiple zeros over the last few contracts, resulting in that situation. Needless to say, in order to retain and recruit good qualified school leaders and administrators, it's imperative that we try to rectify that problem. In order to rectify it, the solution that we came up, and this only makes a pretty good dent in the problem, But the solution we came up with was to provide a 2% general wage increase each year, but then also to add a new top step, which is 2% above the existing step each year of the contract. So for example, somebody who's maxed out currently at a salary that's 20% below the market, in addition to a 2% wage increase, will also advance a step, which is equivalent to 2%. And they'll do that for each of the 3 years of the contract. This will not even come close to making up the 20% deficit, but it'll be a significant move in the right direction. And I think one that's imperative in order to avoid issues with hiring and retention, which I'm surprised, isn't a problem already. The other piece of the settlement involves an increase in the cost share, currently at 20%. That will go up to 20.5, basically 0.5% each year, 20.5, 21, and then 21.5. And otherwise, there are no substantive changes to the contract other than language that we started putting in all the contracts, or we're trying to get in all the contracts, that says essentially, if the cost of the partnership plan exceeds that of the prior plan that we had, we have the ability to switch back, because as I'm sure many of you are aware, the cost of the partnership plan the last couple of years has gone up at fairly significant percentage increases. So that's essentially the agreement and the rationale behind it, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the members?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
On the payout for sick leave, the footnote on the summary says there's no payout for accumulated sick leave, but then it says the contract provides for severance payment of 20% of annual salary retirement. So is that in effect a payout of a portion of the sick leave? And it doesn't look like there was any change there. I'm just trying to understand what the current practice and practice going forward will be.
Yeah, Matt may be able to answer that better, but certainly there was no change to that provision. It's a long-standing provision, and typically in administrator contracts of this nature, you're right. It's typically either one or the other, you'll see, and at the end of the day, it's all money.
Yeah, so after 20 years of service in the district, they receive a payout at retirement of 20% of their salary that they retired on. I think the point of the footnote is, regardless of how many sick days that they're able to accumulate, they're not to exceed the 20% of their salary for payout.
So if they have no accumulated sick leave, in other words, if they've used all their sick leave, they still get the 20%?
Yes, they do.
The 20% is an automatic after 20 years.
Yes.
So if someone potentially accumulates a sizable amount of sick days,
Mhm.
I don't know, what's an average? I don't know.
They get 17 a year.
They get 17 a year. So if no one takes any sick days for 10 years, they have 170 days. They accumulate, right? So potentially, and I'm just asking the question, I don't know if this would, so potentially someone could take numerous months off, use their sick days, and still get 20%.
Well, if they tried to.
Assuming they were
If they were
had an issue.
sick and there was a medical issue and they provided doctor's notes and everything like that, yes.
Not that would happen. Okay, so potentially that could be an event.
Potentially, yes.
Is there a max? Did you say there was a max or not?
There is, I will get you them.
So 17 days a year, and it doesn't, I think that's an interesting question. So is there a maximum of accumulated days?
There is, I will find in the red line contract,
So
but
someone could never take a sick day, work here for 20 years, and I mean, I'm sure it's got to be a max, some reasonable figure.
Any other questions while he's looking?
on that example, I would imagine that if someone wanted to take a block of sick time, that there are rules around documentation from a doctor, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, with some doctor notes, proof of insurance.
Yeah, and I would just add, this is not a group where you would typically see any kind of abuse of sick leave.
And it's a small group. It's only 23.
3 people.
75 days is the max
Okay, thank you.
that they're able to accumulate.
Any other questions?
I don't have any other questions.
Reagan, any questions?
I think it's a very fair contract.
Mr. White, any questions? Sorry, I'm not
No,
looking
I'm
up.
fine. It sounds fair to me.
Sorry, I'm not paying attention to the screen, Bob, so with the hand up, it's behind me.
I won't be shy.
Thank you, thank you. I don't want to ignore you. All right, no other questions, last chance. All right, can I get a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Thank you,
Second.
thank you. And no other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Contract has been approved and is ready to go to the full mark. If you'll have that, be prepared for that
We
for our
will,
next meeting.
yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us today. The next item on the agenda is an update on the fiscal year 2021 audit. And the city has provided us an update for the fiscal year 21 audit and provided a list of open items and that have been included in our handout. Thank you. And from that, we're going to ask Dave or Scott to please provide us with an update on where you stand.
If I may take a moment of privilege to introduce no longer consultant, now Assistant Finance Director, Mr. David Taylor.
Yeah. Welcome. It's been very helpful to this group.
David Taylor CPA, who when it comes to us with a long list of professional credentials and municipal credentials, including Finance Director of the City of Derby, Connecticut. So we're happy to have him both in experience and in temperament. He has been a welcome addition to the team. And so I will turn it over to David for an update on the FY21 audit status.
This has better be a good one.
After that, David.
Thanks, Scott. Good morning, everybody.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
So it's really just a short update and, unless we want to talk about it a little bit, but the audit is on track, continues to be on track to be completed in November. The auditors continue to send us, more lists as we give them one thing, they have a couple more questions, how that works. But we are on track to get everything back to them by the end of this week. I did provide some of the latest lists that they provided us. And there's the rest of the things on there, we are on track to finish this week.
Thank you. Any questions from the members? I'm still diving through this. So based on your timeline, you think you'll be able to get through the rest of this week?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're looking at the sheet with all the questions and
I am.
yeah, that is basically a discussion I need to have with our attorney and we'll knock that out. We're going to get together today or tomorrow.
Okay.
And then the two largest things on here, the police special duty and our chief accountant has been tasked as her primary priority to knock that out.
And if I may add a note in regards to our auditor. Stances, they have been exceptional in their communication and the clarity of their communication and making sure that we're all on the right path to getting this done by the end of November.
Yeah, despite the fact they've been doing a lot from the office, there hasn't been many days that we haven't communicated.
Mhm. Great.
Came in from the board, all their outstanding items had been addressed as of last Friday.
Okay,
And you notice that the sheet from the BOE is everything's done.
perfect. Thank you. I'm looking under the fixed assets because that's one area that we definitely usually run on as a much longer project. And is that just pulling of invoices? Is that it? Or is there, when it says detail?
Yeah, most of the stuff for the fixed assets was supplied yesterday, actually.
Okay.
And I do have,
Because I know that can be a lengthy area.
yeah, absolutely. And there's a sub sheet on one of those. And I have, in order to knock off one of the tasks, there's one more item that I need to chase down. And
Okay.
so we'll be finished with that as well.
Okay, that's good news.
The auditor's being very, very helpful with fixed assets, actually. We had limited time to do it ourselves, so
Okay,
they're being
okay,
very helpful. And that's why there's probably more questions than you would normally see.
okay. Yeah. All right.
I would think of a question. Are
Please.
you waiting for any work from any outside folks? I'm thinking pension actuaries or OPEB calculations or anything like that?
Not at this time.
Good question.
Because this is FY 21, all of that information is
all done.
already
Yeah.
in the warehouse.
Okay.
Very good. Good question.
Ms. Kennison?
Yes.
So, the items covered in this audit checklist for fiscal 21, is there any overlap with the outstanding requests that were directed to the city in connection with the forensic audit? Or is that completely separate?
Two different things.
Okay,
No.
so none of the time periods coincide?
Well,
Or
the time periods overlap. However, everything for the forensic audit has been supplied to
Okay.
Cohen Resnick. I don't know where they are in their finalizing their report, I guess, at this point. There have been overlap in that each auditor has chosen the same sample from time to time, but that's really not an issue.
But I also think it's fair to say that the auditors, upon their engagement, did indicate that based upon circumstances, they would be taking a very close look at some of these items. So they are, in fact, looking at the same, in some cases, the same grouping of items. But that's not to say that that our annual auditor has assigned in any way items from the forensic auditor to Cohen Resnick. They're in fact looking at the same thing.
Yeah, right. They'll do a complete audit.
And if memory serves, the bulk of the data that the city agreed to provide after the audit was completed was related to personnel records, right?
It was,
To be the bulk of.
it was, I think it's fair to say the bulk, but there were a number of vendor invoices as well that needed to be cleaned up. And so a vendor can also be an individual, so it's not necessarily personnel related. So it kind of depends on how you slice and dice that particular item.
Yeah, I would say that the stack, I've got it in the other room, it's about that high of the vendor information that we did supply. And then we actually had a follow-up meeting here. On the payroll, they were kind enough because so many things were duplicative, this person for this, it's the same. They were nice enough to reduce to a sampling so that, they could make a judgment based on the sample of items we provided as to the legitimacy.
So yes, we sat in this room. We got that monitor working, which is why it's working now. And went invoice by invoice with Cohen Resnick and resolved a lot of issues because we were all here and could look at the same thing in real time and make determinations based upon that. So that was I can arguably say that was the best meeting that I've had in my time here in the city of West Haven. The most productive use of time.
Well, it's encouraging to hear that there are no outstanding requests and that
Yes.
these audits can be covered. Thank you.
Yeah, I do recall that the challenges were within the payroll area and reconciliation. Okay. We will be having an upcoming meeting with Cohen Resnick on the full audit because it's a full audit of all, not just focused on the West Haven piece.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
You know the timing on that? I'm sorry.
Of what?
That meeting with Cohen Resnick, we're just curious.
I don't know
Yeah.
yeah, and it's all of them. It's
Right.
not just one, so we're not
Sure.
gonna have the meeting until we're prepared to, they're prepared to be able to report out on all of the towns
Mhm.
that they're auditing. So you're just one of the many.
Thank you.
And I don't know that date at this moment, so I apologize. I've been out of the office. I'm not up to date with my calendar at this moment, but we'll can bring an update to it if we have one at the next meeting. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is to provide us with a update on the development of the budget mitigation measures for the 5-year plan. And the city has updated the, I'm sorry, the most significant open item regarding that was the development of the budget mitigation plan and the controls and the costs over that long-term planning. The city has been working on this mitigation plan and provided an update that's provided, I believe, in our materials today. And Julian tracked me to which one I should be looking at. Is that this one? Yes, I think it is, right?
No.
No,
Um,
forgive me.
It says, it says at the top, the West Haven Development of Mitigation
Thank you.
Measures. It's on. And this. David and Scott and their team put this together as to their first foray into coming up with some long-term measures. So it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
give us a flavor of what they're considering.
that'd be great.
Yeah, yes. Again, stressing that it's a work in progress, we are at the beginning stage of putting together a chart that will track everything and develop goals and assign individuals to it. But there are some things underway. We've been able to make some progress on certain of them. So I did write this little missive here to kind of discuss what we did to get ready to focus ourselves on where we might be able to save money. And you can read down through here, but certain items we took off the table, like the real recent move to the state partnership plan. That this group was not the right group to sit down and figure out, what to do with that ongoing. As was mentioned in the BOA contract, obviously that's something that needs to be reviewed from time to time. The other thing that we noticed, bond payments, other obligations, any post-employment, accruals and payments into funds, they're really out of our control at this point. We weren't looking at those. So we narrowed down our categories. And as we looked at them, there's a little chart in the middle of the report. And you can see solid waste, utilities, maintenance, city insurance. And then it just falls off, down to a very low numbers, low bang for the buck, and potentially spending a lot of time and effort on something where you're not going to save a lot of money once you get past here. So we identified that going into this process. So, and then on the revenues, we wanted to focus on non-tax, non-grant, non-state funding. Put the focus on economic development, some of the other areas where we certainly user fees, where we could possibly make a difference. We sat down together. I think there were 8 of us in the room, 6 or 8 of us in the room, and from different disciplines, and just to sort of, I like to use the word Kaizen. It wasn't really that developed, but we did spend a couple of hours discussing and coming up with ideas. We developed a list of around 30 ideas that we're looking at now. You know, we haven't really fleshed all of them out yet, but there were a few that we feel like are underway and we're moving forward on, and that is the last page of my of the document. Just, it's rudimentary and there, you know, there's a lot of work to be done, but this is the beginning of the work. And, you know, I've added columns in there with nothing, no information in them, because that's what we intend to do is complete that out as we go along.
Thank you for going through this exercise and starting to pull this information together, as we know that it was really important for many of the board members, and it is very prudent to do that. I do know that and can recall, and Julian can remind me and the members, is that the user fee, I believe Mike Malone did a lot of work on that when we had him on site here. Okay.
Absolutely. And, you know, I was able to sit with him on the phone in between trips and, you know, get some advice. And yeah, that did play into our analysis.
Perfect. Julian, do you recall, were there other measures that we had him working on and that would pop out quickly? I do. I remember the user fee, but I didn't remember the other items that we had Mike working on from this committee.
The three large ones that he was working on were the partnership, which was already executed, the user fees, and I think there's still a couple opportunities that may be hanging out there. And then the third was energy efficiency measures across all the municipal buildings. That one is still open.
Right, so the ESCO is something that we have been continually analyzing. We have some thoughts from our town building committee as to how to implement, and we need to kind of focus in. There are a couple of bogeys as it regards to that. We do have aging infrastructure, which has an impact on items, including the inclusion of solar panels and other HVAC efficiencies in buildings like this that may be asbestos related. So it ends up essentially costing you more to remediate than the value of the improvement. So we have to continually dig in on those items. But it's something that we are very attuned to. We are building this for the future, not for the past. So energy consumption is sort of at the top of our list. And when you look, so we're engaging in some solar project analyses that you're always going to pay for energy. But we believe that we have on a path to bend the curve of cost, to flatten out the cost of per kilowatt energy for 10 years. And so we're moving forward on that. Another item of concern in 169 municipalities is the cost of solid waste disposal. And I think that you saw at the last full meeting program to start to address that by diverting food waste into a different stream. Food waste is about 25% of our total disposal cost. So again, you're always going to have to pay for waste disposal, but how do you bend the curve? And how do you simultaneously do the right thing morally for our children and grandchildren in terms of what this world is going to look like for them? So I think that those are some of the big swings that we've taken, and we anticipate good results on those.
Yes. Yes.
So can I follow up on
Please.
the solar? I think you just opened, or it's maybe it hasn't opened yet, but I thought it opened last year. The new West Haven High School, correct?
Yes.
So, question: does that building have solar on the roof there?
It does. We've put solar on I think 3 or 4 of our schools at this point. And then I believe we're starting the renovation of Washington, one of our elementary schools, and I believe that will have solar at the end of the project as well.
Okay, so is that sort of the standard that, I mean, I don't know what age your buildings are and how old the
Washington
roofs
is
are. I know if you
109
got,
years old.
you know, if you got a roof that's gonna need to be replaced in 3 years, you don't wanna go put solar on top of it
Right.
necessarily right now, but, those buildings where you still got a, 15, 20-year life left, probably does make sense.
Yeah, we are actively pursuing that at our schools that have roofs that could handle the weight.
A few months back, I actually think I made a comment. I had been reading a fair amount of articles on solar farms. And up in northern Connecticut, there was a development where there was an abandoned movie theater. It's just an open lot, couldn't do anything with it. And the developer came in, gave the town a proposal and put in a solar farm. And it was, at one point, it was dead space, wasn't producing any income. Taxes were in arrears. And I drive around West Haven every once in a while because I don't live too far from here. And I think you might want to consider looking at those opportunities. And there's an awful lot of development that would throw off, would mitigate your cost per kilowatt hour, and probably perhaps even make the city a few dollars on the right piece of property. So you might, I don't know if you, I remember mentioning it because I happen to be doing a little reading on it. And I thought it was interesting.
Thank you. And one of the great things about having the meeting on site is all of you parked in the parking lot. You will note that there is no tree canopy in the parking lot. So one of our first projects is actually creating parking canopies that are solar in this parking lot here where you parked, which gets sunlight for every minute of every day that the sun is up. So I appreciate your comments because that is exactly what we're doing. So we're starting to look, we're starting the project here and on the city side. The board obviously has their projects as well. We're starting on the city side here and at the police department in creating these police or these solar canopies, which is something that is starting to grow as a concept nationwide.
Just with regarding the parking monetization and some of the plans there, that include outsourcing parking collection, enforcement, and also it says reduce payroll to monitor lots. Who does that? Who engages in that now?
There is a security, so a lot of this comes from beach parking. And so we engage a security firm to collect at the beaches, but next summer, we do not want to be in the cash business. We want to be in the app business. And so we are engaged in a process, and when we get to the MOAs, I think we'll talk a little bit more about it. But a project to get rid of cash, get rid of coins, and do everything parking by app.
And this doesn't overlap. I guess part of my concern or just a thought that anytime you're looking at outsourcing, depending on who it's done by, right? Whether it's one of your bargaining units to engage labor council, if you have to, depending on what your contract language says, at least have minimum of impact bargaining only.
Typically, these obviously outsourced
Yep.
or part-time summer work.
Okay.
So it's not really I don't think it's.
Is that
gonna
what
be a
the
legal
scope
issue.
work or
Yeah.
work jurisdiction of anything? Okay.
And it also would involve areas that there is currently no one. And possibly this lot here. There are a number of areas that were put out and say, hey, here's where we would like to have parking. Rick, 3 bids? 4 bids. And the fun thing is they all have a different way of charging us what they do. And so there's a bit of a process to find out which one is the best for the city.
We do feel that we are in a position to get out of the collection of cash and the enforcement. side of the issue so that our police officers can do the job to which they are dedicated. The city council, specifically Councilman Quagliani, who is with us today, has been very appreciative of that change of philosophy.
This kind of opened up in my mind, beach parking. I don't remember how much parking you have at the beach, but obviously the beach is a huge amenity and it must be, people must be parking somewhere. Is it all street parking near the beach? I don't remember there being a big lot that was like a municipally owned lot, although maybe it's changed in 30 years or whatever. I don't know.
I think there are 11 lots, is that?
Seven.
7 lots.
Seven that non-resident.
Plus,
non-
and how many per resident?
11, altogether there's 11.
Yeah, okay, 11 lots in total.
And so do residents have to have do they pay for a parking sticker?
Sticker.
Or is it a free?
They get it,
For residents.
they get it with their tax.
So there's no charge for residents, but non-residents can park on a daily basis, fee, is that the?
Yes.
And how much money do you collect roughly annually from?
We
that?
collect about $70,000 a year. So we've collected this beach season, which is, so if I look at the season which crosses fiscal years, we've collected about $57,000.
Got a late start this year. Our former method of payment broke down. So we had to cobble something together.
And how about the railroad station? Is that owned by the city or is that owned by the state, or who's responsible for parking at the railroad station?
And so this goes before my term of service here. I recollect about 12 months ago, large stories about people parking for free at the station, and it was going to be enforced by West Haven PD. But that's a recollection. I will find out. And
It'll be interesting. Because usually, my experience, beach parking has probably your biggest potential, although to really realize significant dollars, you need to be imposing some kind of parking fee on residents. And I realize politically that can be not necessarily what politicians want to do, but certainly, even if you said $20 a year, it's the best deal anywhere, probably, if you looked at it kind of just objectively, if you will. And it would probably raise a lot of money at, $20 a year. And then railroad station parking is also, I don't know how heavily used the station is with, since the pandemic. I know train ridership is down, but things seem to be coming back, and New York is trying to get their offices back and occupied, so that may start to trend up. So those would be the two big parking areas that I think there is some opportunity for revenue potentially there.
Yeah, and expanding the paid parking out of the lots and into the streets, especially around the beach and shopping areas are two of the things that are part of the quote.
So currently, the street parking that's sort of within walking distance of the beach is it designated as resident-only parking, or how does that work?
There are certain streets where you have to have a tag to park there, then others you can park at. It's a bit of more of a walk.
Right, but then the only enforcement you have is cops on the beat, basically, so it's not I assume, the highest priority for the police department.
I would hope so.
You don't have a dedicated group of parking meter people that enforce parking.
I mean, I think it is and it isn't, and I'll explain what I mean. The beach is arguably the city's #1 amenity, and it brings in people from all over. And so my old chief of police friend would say, you have to have police officers where the people are. And so we dedicate a lot of resources to the beach. Now, are they looking for a car that is parked improperly? Or are they looking for something more significant? So it depends. We have the eyes on the street. But what they're specifically looking for may change depending on time of day, traffic, et cetera, situation.
I don't want to dominate all of this.
Sure.
Maybe
I do have another question to piggyback off of yours. David, you had mentioned that your former method of payment broke down, so that was a trigger to me. Please tell me and describe to this
So we had
board what happened.
a kiosk type thing where you would stick a card in there.
Okay,
As you would imagine, a location by the beach is not the best for mechanical equipment or electronic equipment. And it got to the point where it was more expensive to repair than it would be to abandon it. And it just wasn't worth the money that it would take to fix it. So just to add parenthetically, July 4th weekend was the first weekend we actually put people on the beach to collect money. And we took on over $10,000 cash. So it's definitely an opportunity. We could expand, and we would expand to more lots.
so therefore you think that the revenue figures that you provided really were focused for the fiscal year of 23 versus 22 if you looked at the beach time? Got it.
No, I think that they were based
For
on
the season.
20. Yeah, I think they were based on season 22. But I think that we can exceed those numbers with a more reliable system that we intend to implement.
If we could collect 12 months of the year instead of 5 or 6.
I got it. All right, very good.
and I would certainly support your
Yeah.
direction of getting rid of handling cash. I would try to, if you can get rid of handling cash everywhere in the entire city, I would recommend doing that, because it's always, whenever there's some kind of theft or something going on, 90% of the time it goes back to something as simple as somebody was handling cash, and so it's really just better to stay away from cash altogether if you can.
Yeah, but you have had a certain amount of angst over this project so far this year.
I would suggest also if you could update your mitigation tracker to include, it didn't call out the user fees, and I knew that there was a whole separate listing of user fees. If you could please add that to your tracker is work in progress. It didn't really, it says waste, but I don't see it called out, as you just had this great discussion around energy. Let's put that on here.
Yeah,
And
like I said, it's a work in
I
progress.
understand. Yep.
Totally intend to get some of these projects that are finished on here.
Sure. And I thought there was one other one that we maybe expand upon the
I
parking.
think there's another big one.
Yes,
that
please.
we've talked about multiple times here in the past, which is there's the whole issue of the fire districts, and whether or not there is any consolidation there, but that could be, generate some savings, but specifically the issue of how the pension funds are invested and, the administration of pension assets, and, consolidating pension managers and, we've talked about that, talked about sort of what's best practice there. So I would want to see that on this list as well.
And I think it was also listed as an action plan from audit finding.
Right.
It's been an action plan since the beginning. I mean, the fire districts there was an analysis done by years back.
Right.
And we really didn't do anything with it, and really shame on us as the board not for pushing it. But I remember distinctly that the pensions, there were huge differences in the profitability for the lack of a better term on some of the pensions. One was demonstrably different percentage-wise than the others, and I think that is something that I think you really should go back and review some of the things that were said in those minutes, because I think it'll give you some insight into the way we were thinking and some of the ideas some of the MARB members had to mitigate those issues. And not that I don't think the beach parking and producing 70 or 80,000. I mean, if you have a banner year, you go from 70 to 110. I mean, that's great. But at the end of the day, You know, if you're gonna, it's kind of low hanging fruit. I think if you really are going to try to right the ship, which it needs to be, I really think you have to look at the, those pensions. I think you have to look at, you know, any of the economies of scale with some of the fire departments.
No doubt.
Not that I don't all support the fire, certainly support fire.
Yeah.
But, you know,
I think our biggest bang for the buck will be economic development projects. Things that raise the tax base and the value of our land and create a place that people want to be. And so those are some, I think, some of the bigger ones also, as well as you can see on your,
well,
we're
after that
filming
Havens
old
project,
schools.
I think you have some tailwinds to get that done.
Yeah,
I
we
think that's
have
an
a,
issue. I was exceptionally disappointed the way that was handled, and the information that was given to us along the way. That's a whole different subset of issues. But I think obviously economic development is, you know, what makes West Haven so much different from developing like Milford has, or some of your surrounding towns. My suggestion has always been to talk to other successful economic development teams, such as Shelton, who is in the middle of the valley and is successful. You got North Haven that's successful. You have some of these other towns to surround you, Milford. You know, I think if you're going to spend your time trying to come up with a mitigation plan, I think you got to go to the top and work down. So,
Right. And I think part of that is getting out of the corporate boundaries of the city of West Haven and engaging more with regional groups like Rex Development, to make sure that we are consistently marketing our properties through a larger entity with a bigger footprint.
right,
So
you seem
that
to have a
we can
micro
competitive.
view of some of these properties and how they're handled, the way I see some of them coming to market. They're kind of done in-house. There's really not a broad view. I think you have to really look at your policy and how you go to market with some of these properties, because I know as I drive around, as I said, I don't live very far from here. There's an awful lot, and there's developers that are here, like the one down by UNH. That development was, I thought, done well. So I think that
Yeah, and we're working with them on additional developments, including bringing Hartford Healthcare in.
Right.
You know, those are the types of things that we want, the things that are specifically local, that you can't pick up and move because the customers of that place live here and must
and you
go
also
there.
have history of paying the taxes on them. It's always fun. So, but that's just my view on that.
With economic development, as you brought up, has there been any shift in at least what my last remembrance of the city's thoughts regarding the Havens property? But I guess what I'm asking for is, has the city finally embraced the fact that development is not going forward?
I think that and I will caution that I am speaking for and interpreting the mayor in these remarks. There was a call a few weeks ago with the developers. I was not on the call, but I heard about the call thereafter, where when asked directly of the development group, are you abandoning the project? The answer was no, no, no. Does it mean it's going to look exactly like they initially figured? Probably not. Not in this environment. But it is privately owned property. And how they decide to move forward is really in their hands at this point. But the project or their desire to develop the project does not seem to be mitigated. It's the how that is the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's my understanding that the May meeting, that, you know, they were pretty clear in saying that to move forward, at least with the Havens project, they needed an influx of either state or city funding. And they were told by the officials here that that wasn't gonna happen, so that kind of answered that question. Um, also, the other thing is just, which strikes me as a little bit in conjecture with, them moving forward, something is CBRE, going back at the end of August, had the property listed, for potential sale. Which I guess if they're looking to move forward with something, maybe they're keeping all options on the table, sell it, unload it, or try and do something.
I think that may be the case. I mean, if you look directly across the water, you see some developments in New Haven that are doing quite well by all appearances. So it could be a subdivision, it could be a revision of the original plan to include more residential. There was the linear park there that I think that we're probably going to be pretty firm on. But there are ways, when you consolidate the parcels, it's pretty large. And it's got a great location.
Yep.
So how it ultimately plays itself out is really in the hands of the developer. And we have some levers that we can push and pull, and that we do push and pull. But at the end of the day, I think what the city really wants is a fantastic development that is going to bring people to the neighborhood, that's going to help inspire additional development, specifically along Elm Street. And you know, growing the grand list. We are interested in organic growth, just nature of property and buildings. But we want to expand the grand list. I think that's what David was talking about, by creating new value, additional value. And that is going to be our mechanism for keeping the mill rate steady.
Yeah, and I would just advise to, as you said, use the tools in your toolbox, whether it be, ordinances having to do with blight, where you can issue fines, or, however you can to keep the developer moving one direction or the other, to get it going, because the longer it sits, the longer it's gonna be a problem.
We can confirm that we are using the blight. So that's,
Thank you.
Getting back to growing your grand list, I think that's a great thing to say, and it makes, certainly is what you want to do, and that's obviously got to be the goal, but you have to have a plan. And, my time on this MARB, there's been a lack of a plan. And I think that you have to have something very definitive, and you have to have targets, just like any other business, right? You have to have targets. You have to be able to figure out a way to get to those targets, hit them, and then move on to the next. And I think that that's something that, I know that you're well versed in many areas, Hampton and the state. So I think that, you're obviously, I think you do make a great team, but I think it has to, you need everybody to buy in, the mayor, everybody. So, but I would like to see what discussions you've had at some point going forward, maybe in the next couple of MARB meetings, when you feel it's appropriate. I would love to hear what those plans are, because I think that's the only way you're going to be able to get out of this hole and to really make West Haven something like some of the surrounding towns.
And we are I titled the finance team.
That's what I figured.
However, I think we are cognizant of the plan of conservation and development. We are cognizant of the 3-year economic development plan. We also understand the limitations of compelling action by private owners, certainly. So I think that we have good experience to sit at that table. And I would love to be able to come back to you in a couple of months with something a little bit more substantial. We did recently lose our Commissioner of Planning and Development, which puts a little bit of a hitch in the giddy up, as you might say. But that's really the primary action in terms of making the city a place where people actually want to invest and do so in a way that is coherent with the desires of the residents of the city.
Thanks.
Anybody?
I have some questions. So I appreciate the discussion around the strategy around economic development, the growth strategy, because I agree that is the surest way to develop a sustainable path toward growing the cities and stabilizing the city's finances. I want to separate out those discussions, though, from what I think are the discussions around the opportunities around the pension funds and the management there. I know I've had conversations with your predecessor, Mr. Jackson, and actually connected him with some consultants who could guide on the preparation of an RFP to really kind of get for the city to get its hands around the scope of the problem and the opportunities, quite frankly. So I didn't see on our list of ongoing requests from the MARB any reference to pension matters, but if we can make sure it's on there, did I miss it?
You didn't miss
Okay.
that. That just seems like it should go on the list. I agree with that.
Right.
So it's a much larger project than sort of an individual info request. So just treating it as sort of a different
Right.
piece, but I think it needs the moving forward on the pension administration and the investment strategy is kind of a big project that needs to have one of these type plans mapped out, like with the steps and who's doing what.
As
And
it's an
maybe-
audit,
Or otherwise, it's just not gonna move forward.
And it hasn't moved forward. So as long as I've been the treasurer's designee on this committee and board, we've discussed a necessity to really kind of understand some of the kind of entrenched approach to managing the pension assets. Separate and apart from the independence of the fire districts, you know, that there is perhaps an opportunity to kind of avail the funds of one general investment consultant, for example, who can, you know, perhaps pool the assets in a way that will give those funds a broader or a deeper asset allocation, which could address some of the return challenges that comparable funds may not have with a little bit, with a different model of oversight. So so maybe on our ongoing list of pending requests, we can have a separate section for the longer term projects, but I really think I want to renew the interest because it just keeps falling off. And I appreciate your comments, Mr. Falsigno. We have to better understand. These are assets that potentially could be more effectively managed. We don't know that yet. We have theories about it, but I think we really need to kind of bring in the expertise that will allow us to really answer those questions to our satisfaction.
I just want to comment, for you, Christine, as well as everybody, that is an audit item that has been and is still an audit item. While we have 3 trackings that we focused on heavily to make sure that they addressed the purchasing, the IT, those were really major. That should also, as Julian mentioned, have its own tracking because it is an audit finding. So I would suggest that we don't put it on this particular one. It needs to have its own bust out with
That's fine.
action plans. But your case in point is very well noted because we didn't bring forth, I don't think we brought forth today, all of the open items that are listed for our audit findings that haven't been addressed. These are 3 of them that spin off, that where the focus has been, but there are many other audit findings that haven't been addressed, that being one of them. Thank you.
As long as it's on some list.
I agree.
Somewhere.
I agree. We have many.
Thank you.
And it does keep rising and dropping. And Christine, I do thank you for your work because I definitely asked for you to help out in that area, and that's the area of expertise.
And I do believe that Mr. Taylor and I are completely receptive, not only to this concept, but I think if we all had a common worksheet,
Yep.
that it would be extremely helpful
Sure.
for us in prioritizing our work.
I have a quick follow-up point. So, Mr. Taylor, are you in the Assistant Finance Director position permanently? Is permanent?
Yes.
Okay, so the update indicates that the advertising is ongoing for an Assistant Finance Director, so maybe we'll change
I
that.
guess they're worried about.
Well, there is an official probation period, but after serving it with us.
Open until filled.
Actually, that particular update is a July update. We did not get a new update for
I
this
see.
meeting. Right.
Understood.
Correct.
A lot can happen.
In a
span
month.
of a-
And it usually does.
Right.
Actually, that's a good win. So we do want that update.
Thank you.
Kim, Kim,
Yes. yes, Mr. White.
just a suggestion. I'm not quite sure how you're keeping the list, but a big project, I think that's a little broader, has to do with the fire districts. And we've talked about, pieces and a common manager, and all those are good things. But is there something where we can focus on how we get the mill rate down? Because as people have said, because when you lump together the city and the fire districts, they're in the top 5. And I don't know who leads that effort. I think we have to look at Allentown because the city has their hand in that. The other two, I'm not quite sure what levers we might have, but I would suggest we do that because I think that is a little broader issue that really needs to be addressed, and if successfully addressed, can really help the city's long-term future.
Agree. Thank you, Mr. White. Any other questions on this?
I just wanted to go back to the economic development, 2 sort of specific questions. One is, with respect to the Haven project, is there some sort of development agreement to which the city is a party with the developer on that project, or is it totally and completely, in the hands of the developer? So I'm wondering if there is a development agreement, for instance, if the city agreed that, as with the developer, that you were going to, I don't know, put money into public infrastructure in the area, or whatever it is that, could be in a development agreement. There may be some timelines in there, and if there are, I'm wondering what those timelines specify.
There is a development agreement, because we did front dollars for certain demolitions on the site. So there is a development agreement. Unfortunately, I do not have it, and I'm not certainly as well versed as Attorney Tiernan, who could not be here with us today. But there is a development agreement. We did receive funds from the state of Connecticut via DECD to engage in this project, and the returns from that grant will refund the dollars that we have spent on demolition, approximately $1.3 million. But I would have to have Attorney Tiernan give you
So
that.
I'm interested in whether or not there are any timelines in that development agreement that the, developer has to do X by such and such a date, and if so, what it is they have to do and what that date is.
Well, there is a trigger that I know of, which is the creation of footings for development. But I do not know of a timeline, but I will have Attorney Tiernan deliver through OPM staff the details of that agreement.
Okay, great. And then the other question, which is sort of broader, which is, I'm assuming that the city has a plan of conservation and development, because they're required to have such a plan. And I believe they need to be updated once every 10 years or something like that. So that's another document that I think would be good to have access to, even if, it's probably this giant document. So maybe it's, an online version of it, or maybe it's posted on your website already. I don't know. But in terms of sort of understanding what the vision is for development of West Haven, one, make sure that the plan of conservation and development is in fact updated, because there are some communities that may have gotten behind in that, and want to make sure West Haven in fact has a current plan of conservation and development. And then number 2, understand better sort of what is the vision, for developing whether it's the waterfront area, Campbell Avenue, one, you know, you've got a bunch of areas that have, I think, potential for redevelopment, if you will. And so I'm curious, kind of what is the vision of where does West Haven go over the next 10 years?
Okay, well, we can certainly get to you, either the development agreement or a reasonable summary if it's hard to parse, for the Havens, as well as, information on the POCD.
Okay, thank you.
Julie?
And then, you also made reference to a 3-year economic development strategy. So we could, when we get either, you know, a link or point us to where we could find that as well, because that'll hopefully spins off of the POCD and is in alignment with it, but give us an idea of specifically what strategies and tactics the city has in mind for development.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Scott, the 1.3 million that was put in for demolition, was that money that is supposed to then come back to the city?
That is correct.
And do we, if I could just ask, with the development agreement, if specifically when you forward that, which I hope wouldn't take too long, if it could be specifically highlighted what part of that agreement mandates or talks about that 1.3 million and how the city recoups it.
Well,
Thank you.
Has work been done using that 1.3 yet?
yes, demolition has been,
Completed?
yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on this topic? All right, then we'll move on to agenda item number 5, no 6, and that is the firefighters agreement. At the September MARB meeting, the board raised issues with the firefighters agreement that's on this agenda, and the board wanted some clarity in the intent of the provisions regarding manpower and whether the commitment to increase manpower, if the city is awarded the SAFER grant, would it be a permanent commitment? Yes or no? And was it also, it was not clear for all of us to whether the financial impact of the increase of the manpower would be just for the grant period or if it would be ongoing. If it was to be ongoing, we would want to make sure that that would be included in our overall plan, the 5-year plan. The board also then signaled that it had found that the one-time hazardous pay stipend to be excessive and that it encouraged the city to revisit the use of the ARPA funds. Consequently, the board was not, we did not approve the firefighter contract, nor did we approve the agreement for the hazardous pay stipend. So while these items are before the full board, had gone before the full board, we're looking for an update today to see where the status is on these 2 items.
We have Chief Terenzio of the Allentown Fire District, who will speak to those items.
Thank you.
Good morning. Well, thank you for the time to provide the clarification that is so important that you are looking for. I'd like to speak to the contract, which is very important in my estimation, on the question of the increase from 5 to 6 minimum manning. And I know that Mr. Egan is very concerned about that as well, having worked in that industry. Yes, as the fire chief, I can increase to 6, and I do on emergency or emergent conditions. At times when we need to have 6, I can do that. It's built into the budget. However, not on a permanent basis. The request for SAFER, haven't been here just less than 2 years. I identified one of the main things needed to be done was to increase the minimum on-duty staffing to 6 to meet the NFPA 1710 standard. Which is for fire suppression operations, emergency medical operations, and special operations to the public by career departments. And this is the 2020 edition, Chapter 3. And to give you a better understanding of the situation that we have here, not just in Allentown, but the city as a whole, the NFPA identifies a dense urban area has a population density of over 3,000 people per square mile. And certainly West Haven meets that. And essentially Allentown, which is 3.2 square miles, with 16,500 residents, meets 5,500 people per square mile. The standard, which again, I want to emphasize, is a recommended standard. This is what most fire departments throughout the country try to meet. Operating units, according to the NFPA, minimum levels necessary for safe, effective operation, engine companies shall have 4 on board. What is really important to understand here is that we need to have 6 on duty because we're doing EMS as well. Right now we have 5. 68% of our calls are EMS, so that takes 2 of my 5 out. So that leaves 32% of the time I am responding with less than what the NFPA recommends. And what is also more importantly, which is not a recommended standard, but a mandated standard, is OSHA. And OSHA 1910-134 section G4 requires the 2 and 2 out rule. And so that effectively leaves me 38% of the time I do not have the minimum that OSHA can come back on us, which they may not necessarily do, to have 2 individuals outside to immediately intervene in an emergency for 2 in an IDLH atmosphere. What is also important to understand is that the SAFER grant process uses NFPA as a guideline. And in the 32-page applications that is required to submit to the federal government for this type of funding, it's all related to and based on NFPA. Now, I understand there was a question that the SAFER grant is only a 2 full-year funding and 33% in the 3rd year. That's incorrect. Last year and this year, the federal government, in their wisdom, has increased the full 100% funding for 3 years with no applicant match. That's why it's very significant that we went in for this, because it'll be for 3 full years. And the other question was, what happens after the 3-year period of performance? We, as a department, would have to maintain that minimum manning. So in presenting it to the board,
Sorry, can I interrupt you? Just you would have to maintain that minimum manning under this is the question. You'd have to maintain the minimum manning under the terms of the contract, which is before us, which increased the minimum manning, or you'd have to maintain that higher minimum manning level as a requirement of the grant agreement.
That's exactly. We would have to maintain it as a requirement to receive the grant. That is why it would have to be accepted and adopted by the city council or the governing body of the city.
And then, so there must be some limitation. They can't, well, maybe they can, but I'm assuming they don't say you have to maintain it forever. Is it a 5-year period or something like that? Or is it literally forever?
It's literally forever, as far as, because there's no other guideline on that. The period of performance is 3 years for sure, but they also require that we maintain it in perpetuity. And it's not a CBA requirement. It's a federal government requirement.
I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right.
Before I forgot my question, so.
So if the federal government's identifying and recognizing that need, I believe that and in all the peer review that they do, it's important. And I think it's also important to realize is that this year's SAFER grant process, they've increased the available funding to the applicants by $200 million this year, up to a total of $560 million. And this year there's 1,585 applicants have submitted requests for over $2.5 billion. That's how much needed manpower is out there in the United States. If we are successful in getting this grant, we will be, it was quite a competitive process. What's also important to note is, and what is most pertinent to your question right now, is the contract. And the contract says if we get to safer, that we must maintain 6. But the contract's only 3 years, and so is only the safer grant. But it's really a moot point whether we have 5 or 6 in there in the contract, because they coincide. The period of performance for 3 full years coincides with the length of the contract of 3 years. Which then again, after 3 years, that would become a negotiation. But the federal government will be dictating as to the minimum manning that we will have if we get, and the request is $1.3 million if we're successful, to put on one additional man for each of 4 shifts for 3 years. We have also, in explanation to the city council, we will be building in for each of those 3 years, 1 additional person in our budget request to have that funding in place to continue maintaining the 6th individual. Any questions?
Yes, I have some questions.
Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. No, you're fine. So you did mention the word in perpetuity, if we go on to the contract for the grant. We didn't get a chance to see this grant contract, correct? We just have it embedded inside the actual firefighters contract, right? So I questioned that. I just questioned that because when you're usually under a grant, it's terms of the grant. You need to get this muted. Please mute if you're on the line. And so I haven't seen a contract from a federal government where they make it beyond perpetuity, beyond the grant terms, not even in any of the state contracts that I've seen, okay? So if that is the case, that is very important for this group to understand that, because when you're going under contract with bringing on additional workforce, what happens? We're in financial distress right at this very moment. And what happens if we needed to downsize? And now we're saying that no matter what, we never can downsize on the fire side. This group needs to know that.
I understand your question,
Okay.
and I may have used possibly the wrong verbiage.
Okay.
I don't have the documentation from Safer with me. I apologize. But what they do require is if we are recipients of the grant, we have to signify to them that we will continue it. They don't give a definite time. And I'm sure they've also probably asked that exact question that you did.
Definitely. Okay, so that would be important. Now, if in this contract, those folks that when you go under contract with bringing on new staff, new firefighters, and when you do that, are you going to embed in their contract that their service is grant related?
That would it's not required, but it would probably something that we should probably consider.
I would agree from this board. Unless the members feel differently.
In my experience with union contracts, and I've negotiated for 30 years on my own, I've never seen a union negotiate people out of a contract. So I think this board has to realize that once you, and this grant may be the greatest thing, may be perfect for you, and I'm sure it is. But I think once you hire those people and at the end of 3 years, you have a financial decision to make, I think that the bat's going to be taken out of your hand. Just from a union side, that's just the nature of the.
Typically it's seniority based.
Right. So
these would be new positions. And so I'm suggesting that in the negotiation, I've seen this in teachers before, where you're bringing on research teachers and their federal government subsidizes the money for that research. And in those contracts, they are have a term, which is grant related, the grant funding being one of the requirements. Should it go away?
I don't see that here.
Yeah. Okay.
I would just find that hard to
Sure.
negotiate out.
I would just like to, as far as my thoughts go, is that being that, and certainly interpreting the the majority, what it seems like, or the whole board at the full board meeting is the staffing tied beyond the grant period was the issue.
Yep.
With the chief's representation that it's mandated by acceptance of the grant, I think twofold. You know, I think we have a grant issue, and if that's still an issue for the members of the board, I think the acceptance of the grant, and I don't know what authority we have there, and it should be reviewed. But as far as trying to get the contract move forward and kind of put to bed, if the grant maintains some in perpetuity mandate, and the reason why there's some type of agreement between the parties is for increasing the staffing to take kind of the roadblock out of getting the contract approved, the language in the collective bargaining agreement becomes somewhat irrelevant, because if the federal grant mandates that, it doesn't matter what the contract says. You could say it says 3, you know, but the federal grant mandates it. So it may want to be recommended, and I know part of the statutory language with tier 4 of rejection is coming back to the parties and saying, this is kind of what will make it work. I think, unless I've misinterpreted my colleagues, that what would make it work is if that language wasn't there. And so that should satisfy via the grant, assuming that, you know, the grant is able to be gotten, to get that out of the way, to put this to bed, to remove I guess I believe that you have staffing language already at 5 minimum.
Yes, we do.
So no change to the staffing language, because the grant ultimately, if accepted by the chief's representation, would kind of override a collective bargaining agreement anyways.
Or it's
For 3 years.
I mean, I agree. I think, yeah, I guess, first of all, I see us kind of sitting in the role of management, if you will, when it comes to collective bargaining arrangement. Obviously, the employees have their own interest and you know, make their own arguments and you know, represent themselves. But I think we're really on the, you know, looking out for the finances of the city of West Haven, and I don't see that there's any real upside for the finances of West Haven to put in this additional requirement in the labor contract that specifies that you're going from a minimum of 5 to a minimum of 6. You know, I understand how the union would be interested in pushing that, but, you know, sometimes management has to push back and say, no, we can't agree to that. And you know, I just don't see any advantage to having that language in there. You know, as you say, if you get the grant, and I do think, given that this grant sounds like it potentially could have long-term financial implications, I think the grant should come back to the MARB board for approval, you know, when that's an appropriate time to do. Maybe it's not until after you receive word that you're going to get the grant. Maybe it's an acceptance of the grant should come back to the board for approval, and then a final decision about that can be made after we've looked at the, you know, what the terms of the grant are and how long we're obligated to fund the additional position for. If it's forever, then we need to know that going into it. Again, I don't see any real advantage from the standpoint of the financial standing of West Haven to change your existing labor contract to go from 5 to 6. Doesn't mean you can't go forward with the grant, and you know, that's a separate decision. And if you get the grant, then great. You know, that is something we can decide on at that point.
I would be more than happy to provide the answer to the question about what does the federal government look at for its extended beyond the period of performance of 3 years.
Thank you.
And the grant awards have begun. Safer grants have begun. Awards have been announced beginning August 29th and up until 2 weeks ago. I anticipate hearing as soon as possibly tomorrow or by the end of this week and up to the end of the month, beginning of next. They should have just allotted all the money. So we could have these answers as soon as tomorrow. I can get that information Mr. Jackson and the city to get to all of you to help you understand better.
Since you're creating a list of questions to answer, Chief, it strikes me that contract language, which makes reference to a minimum of 5, is not inconsistent with staffing at 6. And one of the question I would pose is, can the contract language make reference to minimum of 5, which doesn't constrain the city long-term, as Mr. Hamilton has cautioned, and we could still staff 100% funded for the 3 years without there being the contractual provision which references 6.
I appreciate that, and I think, speaking to those of you and that are in the audience now that have been involved with the fire service, it's not water necessarily, or equipment, or the best equipment, or the most expensive equipment that puts out fires. It's people. You have to have a certain amount of people immediately and predictably available to effect the mitigation of a fire condition. Certainly, as a fire chief, it's my job to advise my employers in what will be best for the protection, obviously. And we have such things as the NFPA and OSHA and all the other acronyms that govern us to help us find that guidance.
So to be clear, Chief, I think that there's agreement and deference to the assessment that you've described to us. What I think we're focused on is a very technical matter about squaring the contract term with the requirements of the grant and making sure there aren't long-term constraints that the city will ultimately bear. So it's a given what you've concluded about the merits of going to 6. I think you can get to 6 with reference to a minimum of 5. And I would like just confirmation from the council who are very experienced in negotiating these matters. I want to make sure that would be a compliant approach to the terms of the federal. So add that to your list if you would. Thank you.
I absolutely will. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chief, how many times do you upstaff? You said at time.
We upstaff, we have policies and procedures in place for significant storm-related events, winter storms, hurricanes, special events that have a congregation of people, things of that nature, where we may need to have a fully staffed additional engine in maintaining what we normally respond to.
And when you respond, just talking, you know, as far as the 6 folks and your EMS calls, and then being left, or with 5 folks and then being left with 3, is it, when you get a call, I know there's some interworkings, right? Mutual aid, I guess, amongst the.
Yes,
right?
we do. That's very robust,
Yeah.
I must say.
And when you guys get a call, you're responding with, let's pretend you have 3 or even 5. You're responding with 1 rig, you're bringing 2.
We're bringing 2. And it's,
So it's like 2 and 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
when there's 3, when 2 of the staff, paramedic doing an ALS response, I have 3 left in my station. And when it's a smell and bell and there's not significant reports, we'll respond only without backup from the other 2 districts. And we're responding with 3. We'll roll a quint and the engine. When 5 are on duty or in the station and there's no EMS, what happens is we beach the rescue. And in our current facilities, we have to pull the rescue truck out, bring it around their back, park it. And the 2 individuals board with the captain, the quint, and then 2 individuals go on the pumps. So when the rescue is not responding to an EMS call, we do have 5 to initially start an operation, and we do pretty well. Our area of demand, we have multiple 2.5 and 3-story wood frames with 15-foot spacing. And twice now in my short tenure here, we've had 2 significant fire calls where I was fortunate that the rescue wasn't out and we threw 5 men initially at it. Of course, I have the rest of the cavalry coming from my more than qualified colleagues in both the Center District and West Shore. And we are working quite closely, I have to say, operationally, where essentially we have 25 staff on duty citywide, and we can rely on that. So anything after a second alarm, we're calling in New Haven and mutual aid. But that's essentially what it looks like. 32% of the time I'm responding with 3 to a fire call. And 68% I'm responding with 5.
And I guess just to kind of reiterate my point, I think the holdup here, as I sense at our full board meeting, is really the language, not as much your staffing needs, right? And two things, and to kind of piggyback off what Ms. Shaw raised, is one, if there's a grant mandate, it's a mandate, so the contract language almost becomes irrelevant. So to get that out of the way, I'd say get it out of the way. If I was negotiating for the union or being a chief, you know, I wanted staffing too. I wanted to keep the agreement that I negotiated back in '06. But also that even going forward, there's a minimum mandate, but there's not a max. So you can always request in a budget to have enough for 6 folks. So maybe to move this ball, it might be suggested that the parties get together, maybe get that out of the way. And if that's done, I might be getting ahead of myself, but then, and this might give you some comfort, is that talking to the administration, that the 5-year plan reflect a 6th position in your budget.
Those conversations certainly couldn't be had and initiated. And as a fire chief, I'm only recognizing and identifying what I need to help protect the constituency. And certainly I can only staff up to what the budget will allow.
Right.
And within that confine.
There certainly is an appreciated importance of having a full complement of men or women on the scene fighting a fire. In New Haven, we wrote a minimum of 4. And, even that brought challenges at times, and we're responding. I don't know what first alarmist response today, but I know also, I believe 23 on just a first alarm of fire.
Right, and having spent 36 years myself in the city of Stanford, there was a mini maxi staffing. There was an absolute drop dead minimum that had to be on duty, just like in New Haven. But there was also additional people to act as a shock absorber to fill in for the vacancies that occurred, but always to have that minimum established. And I believe the NFPA, and I didn't bring with me, there's a rough calculation. It's so simple. If you have, in our case, 55,000 people, there should be at least 27 to 28 people available to respond. A half a firefighter per 1,000 population with a commander, and not even with an aide. So I'm speaking to a fellow firefighter, and I'm sure you understand my challenges.
Mr. White.
Thank you. Just to make sure I understand the dollars involved, this is a grant application for Allentown only. Is that correct?
Correct.
And it's about 430,000 a year for 3 years?
Correct.
Okay. And would you reflect that in years 4 and 5, would you revise your 5-year plan or I guess the city has to revise the 5-year plan with Allentown to reflect that, to see what effect that will have on the mill rate? Because, again, I think I agree with everyone that there's no reason to change make it mandatory under the bargaining agreement. The grant, the feds will tell you what they need to do. They can change their mind, but, you're going to have to comply. But there may be some other things that you have to do to keep the total expenditures down. You obviously, because this is a matter of safety, that, I think we owe you a lot of deference, but I think we do have to take a look at the overall impact on the Allentown budget, because there are serious issues there. So,
if I may, Mr. White, I did submit a 5-year plan. It is in the city's hands, and I believe I did include it as you suggested. And moving forward, I would also like to say that the city of West Haven Fire Services, and again, I have to remind you, I'm only here less than 2 years, has been successful in doing joint grant applications, and we are trying to improve and increase the things that cost, the capital costs of fire trucks and radios and SCBA's. Last year, we were successful in getting a joint request, which the Allentown district posted a regional request for the other two districts to replace all our SCBA's. They're $7,000 each to have available. That was a $363,000 grant. So that's good for 10 years. We are also, in addition to the SAFER grant, we're awaiting an AFG grant that we submitted for all new radios because our radios are 12 years old. And the estimated cost for that is right around $1 million to replace those very important pieces of equipment. We have reason to believe, and our grants administrator is not here right now, but he would be able to verify what I'm going to tell you next, is that we've had communications with FEMA, that grant that we submitted is being recommended for award. So we're excited about that. They haven't received it yet, and who knows, it might not happen, but we've also exercised a grant that we received in 2019 in Allentown for a new fire truck, and we'll be receiving that in November. Again, these are expensive capital improvements that we would need that otherwise would have to be borne by the city constituency that we are taking care of with federal funding. And hopefully that will all equate out to where we'll be able to meet that year 4 and 5, as you asked, to have that 6th individual on duty. It's difficult to look into the crystal ball, but, and I'll leave you with this as far as for the sake of time. Last year when I put in this exact same grant, they ran out of money. We received a call directly from the FEMA SAFER Directorate out of Washington. And she told both myself and our grants administrator, you would have had that grant if we had enough money. If you were to put that same grant request in this year, right now, with a little bit of a tweaking on the financial, she would be talking to us about an award. So that's pretty good indication. So we have our fingers crossed, but we think we're going to get it. So, I mean, we're talking right now. We don't have it yet, but we anticipate hearing within the next few weeks. But it's important that you all understand that.
Now you had a question.
No, I mean, I certainly am not, I certainly don't have any experience telling you how to run a fire department. I don't intend to, but we are a municipal accountability review board.
Yes.
So we look at numbers, and that's what we're here for.
Right.
So the question at the end of the day, to me, is you get 430,000 a year times 3, which is $1.3 million.
Yeah.
If we extrapolate the numbers out, we have, I think our job is to see what happens after year 3. So we have to look at, you know, not only the 5-year plan, but you have to kind of extrapolate out and say, okay, what's this really going to cost? Because Allentown, I know you've only been here for 1.5 years. I've been on the board, I think, 3 years. And the financial issues with the fire districts is certainly an issue. So I think we need to make a decision, and for us to make a decision on this, we have to know what it looks like in year, right? And yeah, so, and I'm not, again, nobody respects what you guys do more than I do. So
appreciate that.
But from a financial standpoint, I think that's really our decision, not to tell you how to run the place, but
exactly,
you know,
within your means.
Within our means, and I agree. And part of running a fire department, Mr. Eagle, is also the numbers. We have to take those into consideration.
I have 2 final questions. One, when you submitted your plan back to Mr. Jackson and Mr. Taylor, did you include the 6th position when it was included in the 5-year plan that was submitted to the board, or does that need to be in the revised?
No, I believe it's in there. It is in there.
I'm asking, but I want Mr. Jackson, because they could have removed it in the, they could have removed it when they did the compilation.
I didn't remove anything from
Okay.
the documents that I had, but I
Okay.
really would like to check.
No
to make
problem.
Sure that it's.
Okay, very good. I understand you submitted it, but a lot of people submitted a lot of numbers that they did not get in the end. Thank you. Sorry, not to be rude. My other question is on the grant and the terms of the grant. You said they have received your application already. When in the submittal of the grant, if you are accepted, what are the terms of the start date to the end date when you're saying it's a 3-year grant?
It's a period of performance. They anticipate as soon as possible to onboard through your hiring process and your development of your personnel to get them through the academy, get them EMT, get them equipped. So you essentially have a good full year for it to begin. Once they're ready is when we tell them, okay, they're on board, you can start the clock.
Oh, so the clock starts after they're here?
Yes.
All right, that's different in a grant term. Usually they have
Yes.
hard cut solid dates of when it ends.
Chief, what do you carry in your budget as far as firefighters, not lieutenants or officers, but just firefighters?
We have 20 staff.
20 staff. And so you would, essentially you would hire 4 more, you would carry 24.
Yes.
You guys work a 3 on 3 off?
Yeah. Oh, no, we work 24s.
Okay, so 24/72.
Yes.
You'd have to hire 4 more people.
4 more people,
Which means,
1 per each shift. There's
right,
4 shifts.
right. I know, yes, okay. So at the end of the day, in the 4th year, fireman makes 140, 150,000 a year with benefits. Ballpark, maybe a little less,
Not in
130.
Arlington. It's hard to hold on to them because they're moving on to other options.
Okay, so they're gonna be entry level fire.
Entry level right now, our first step firefighter is about 54, 55.
Probably full set, they're probably about 120 something with the full
And he's-
benefits
With the
package.
Right.
Yes, I think that would be a more of an accurate, yes, sir. About 100. Would be safe.
Any other
In
questions?
general, we had about 41%. Firefighters a little different because we have to add in the equipment and.
Right.
And some of the other items.
Which is
41% is our standard.
which is about another, which the SAFER grant does not, and that's a good question, does not cover, is the onboarding of equipment and things of that nature.
So at the end of the day, you get 1.3, you gotta hire 4 people, which means you're gonna have them in year 4. And
In front of
say
the house.
120, right, so you got 480, right? So you pretty much exhausted the grant in a couple of years, and you're gonna have those guys going forward, I would think,
It
by
is,
contract.
Well, the grant's
It-
annual.
it is-
You get
it is.
3 years.
it's
It's
really, I mean,
Correct.
it's.
Well, no, it's 430 a year times 3.
Right, but I'm going to be adding a firefighter, and this, I'm putting an additional firefighter every year into.
Right,
that
into
budget.
your budget, right, okay. So you mitigate part of it that way.
Right.
Any other questions on this topic?
I guess just a question for me and probably the chief of the union is where have we left them at? Okay, I mean, so again, I would, unless everybody wants to vote yes on it, then it's fine, but I don't see that happening. I would suggest that maybe the parties get together and look at that language, because I think absent an increase in the manning, which doesn't seem to be, would be irrelevant anyways, as far as the language, if there's a mandate through the grant and or there's support from the council to, look at this in year 4 and 5 as far as staffing, but maybe if that is the, unless I'm missing something, that's the kind of the log jam of why this would not make it through our board. So if that's out of there, I think there's a majority of the board, that's just my assessment, but majority of the board who would support it. So I think we should give them some guidance, kind of per the statute a little bit, to say where we think the parties need to be for for the majority here to support it.
Yeah, I would agree. If you can come back to the full MARB board meeting with that language going from 5 to 6 removed from the contract, I would be ready to support the contract. And, in terms of the grant, I think it is very important that we get confirmation of, that year 4 and 5 of the 5-year financial plan either already includes the additional cost, or if it doesn't, we need a revised, updated copy of that 5-year plan when the grant comes to us for approval. Those are really 2 different steps. One is the approval of the contract. I'm ready to vote in favor of that. If you are able to remove that language going from 5 to 6, and then the grant, again, I think I'm supportive and understand and want to be as deferential to, to you as the fire chief. This is a matter of public safety. So I'm generally think I'm probably supportive of the grant. I'm a little worried about language that, it would be nice if it didn't say it was in perpetuity from my perspective, but, we'll have to see what the grant language actually says on that. And certainly, if we are going forward with the grant, I would want to see it built into year 4 and 5, the cost of that and how that sort of plays out.
I agree. Thank you for summarizing
I
that.
agree with what Mr. Hamilton.
All right. You
So
have your takeaways.
is that, the guidance going to get issued from this board back to the respective parties?
It's 4 items, 5 items. I think that you have covered it. Is it necessary? We're looking for a very quick turnaround in 2 weeks. Okay, because MARB runs every 2 weeks. So I think that they
Okay.
know what their marching is.
We'll have it done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you forgot anything, this is taped. You can always look back. Moving on to the next item of the agenda, and we're really running short on time, but this one is important. It's an update on the brewery development agreement.
Wait a second, Ms. Kennison, you had alluded to the outstanding issue regarding the hazardous pay. Did we not discuss that? Is there any update on that?
I can provide that really
Thank you.
quick, really quick.
Thank you.
The, as I understand the challenge right now is the hazard pay, which does not require a contract MOU. It's a one-time lump sum. And I refer to the U.S. Department of Treasury and the January 2022 guidance and their final rule. And it's essentially premium pay for essential workers, and they identify essential workers as first responders. They can provide a premium pay for eligible workers who bear the greatest health risks. We can give them a one-time payment, and the $10,000 to all the firefighters that work the same schedule, it essentially works out to about $4.60 an hour additional. It's a one-time lump sum. It's not tied to any contract. It's just a recognition of their hazards that they faced. And what's also important to note is that through the grants administrator for the city, we had to give them, we have to provide the total compensation of all the firefighters between March 2020 to March 2021, March of 2021 to March of 2022. What's significant about that is that during the height of this pandemic, or at the beginning of the pandemic, having worked in it myself, we were essentially building the runway as the planes were landing. No one had, this was a novel thing. The burn rate of our PPE, which were the masks, the gloves, the gowns, the goggles, the burn rate was exceeding the rate that we were able to resupply the PPE. So we were reusing N95 masks and things. So they were facing an additional risk. That was the pandemic, because we still did not know how it was going to react, how to totally mitigate it and keep it from spreading. While everyone else was being asked and told to stay home, we had to continue to come in. Remember driving to work sometimes, where is everyone on today, Monday? Essentially, firefighters do what we're able to do because we're properly trained and equipped to run towards the building or the emergency while everyone else is running away. We don't have any of that. We're in no different or in just as much risk as anyone else. So that extra risk that they face, and people like them, the healthcare workers, I mean, there's a whole gambit of people that had to deal with this pandemic. The firefighters had to continue to do so. And even with our medical control out of Yale, in their attempts to try to maintain a bed level so they won't have them overrun, they were directing our paramedics to respond to a COVID call, do an assessment on their airway, breathing, and if they were okay, not to transport them to the hospital. There was protocols and criteria put in place. But the hospital saying, no, keep them over here, but yet you still have to go in and face it and deal with it. So we feel, and this was a collective request by the other two chiefs in this city, for all the firefighters in the city, an extra $10,000 for each guy as a recognition of the hazard that they faced, which amounts to about $4.60 an hour addition. And it's not tied to any contract.
I think we had discussion on that, and actually there was an MOU submitted, wasn't there?
Yes, there was.
There was for the fire department?
Yes.
You from the, I believe there was, that
Yeah,
was signed
labor
off
agreement.
as far as the tentative agreement
Yes.
by either Attorney Hodgson or the city's representative and the respective fire unions. Because it was determined that regardless of the funding source, it was mandatory subject to bargaining.
Okay,
That was
and
the
I,
last, that was the last.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, that was signed,
Yes.
I think the morning of the last full MARB meeting.
okay,
So maybe from a financial perspective, rather than it just looking like somebody is just throwing a number into the middle of the room and you think that it should stick. You just quoted a dollar amount of what the pay increase would be for doing that. Maybe having that calculation supplied to the staff that we could then share might be helpful for us to understand that, so that we know that this is a reasonable number versus it's not a reasonable number, because there is a base pay increase that was already provided to us before for 10,000 for the police, and that was a bump up on the base of the police side. Let's make sure, I'm not trying to keep anything from folks that really deserve what they do. But I think that it is important for us, for transparency, to be able to understand where you're coming up with that calculation.
we'll have that.
Members,
to
do you agree? Or anything else? That could help with this.
To me, $10,000 is a big payment.
Right, they said it's excessive.
I
At the moment.
I know, I'd be interested in knowing what other public safety agencies in Connecticut have done, if anything,
Comparable?
in terms of, providing pandemic hazard pay. From where I sit, and I understand, I fully do get it, that some people did get, put in situations, put them at greater risk. My daughter got her nursing license at the end of January 2020, started work, she was still in training, and 6 weeks later, she was, in full hazmat suits in COVID ICU at a hospital up in Boston.
Wow.
Hadn't even finished the in-service training, and she's in the middle of it. So I understand, that, some people did more than others, certainly during the pandemic, and firefighters having to, go out and be, with patients and address them, did certainly put them at greater risk. But $10,000 seems like a lot. I would like to know what other public safety agencies in Connecticut have done, so that we can kind of put it in context.
Is this a suggestion, what you read from the federal government, is that a suggestion?
Oh, that's a good point.
Or is it a suggestion, or is it something that they're mandating? Is this in?
All the federal government?
Yeah.
In
For
their
the,
final rule,
again, is it a suggestion? Is it?
It's a
advisory?
suggestion.
They create categories.
There's nothing that says you have to do this.
Absolutely not.
No, we do not have to.
Permissible.
Just wanted to make sure, because that's
They
what they're
do put a
allowed,
cap.
right, and my interpretation was that it was something that was,
They do provide a cap.
individually, yeah, I understand, but was individually it was a suggestion, it wasn't mandatory that towns have to do this, or should or shouldn't, it
No,
was just
it's
a
a
decision, individual decision by each municipality for this situation. I
For
mean,
the use of those funds.
For the use of
that
those funds,
Larry-
right,
Yeah.
right. And if I remember correctly, the amount of firemen, how, was it how did we?
130?
Yeah,
The
Yeah.
total number, I think
hundred
was,
and thirty,
no,
firemen,
not
right?
130, it was below. I think total between all three districts, there's 104, but there was a number that we've lost some. I think the number was closer to 96 or 98. I don't have it in front of me, but there was those that have left and that wouldn't be getting it and that kind of.
So people who work during that period who are separated or not, wouldn't be part of getting it?
That's not what we're recommending.
So we probably should just get clarification on what it is, but I think to Tom's point, it probably helped to get, contiguous communities, the 5 above and 5 below on the Anglic chart as far as paid departments who might be getting something like this. I think it probably would be a question that some might ask, because this is, different than the police, right? The money for the police was to basically equalize their pay with competing communities.
Sure.
So
that was for retention.
yeah, right, to keep them on. So it may make sense to look at, and this might be a legal opinion, how, I guess, a couple things. One, how ARPA funds, to the degree that they can be used in an ability to pay argument, which I don't know if they can, but for a bargaining unit at arbitration, are those funds able to be considered for that? And two, does this create an exposure with any of the other bargaining units who may claim in a subsequent contract here to say, hey, what about, like even with the cops, because it's the same number, but I guess a different reason why. And I think that would probably allay the concerns of the board, at least having those answers.
One moment. Julian, we did receive, I thought, a legal opinion on these things.
He's, what I think Patrick's referring to is, does the availability of ARPA funds play into the ability to pay consideration? Is that what you were?
Yeah, I'm not getting into whether it can be done. I think it can be, just as
Right.
ARPA funds are used for private business. Why
Right.
couldn't they be used for?
Correct.
It was more specifically the 2 other districts, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that's an issue. It's more of are they considered, which I don't think they are, but I think a legal review, are they considered for ability to pay if it came down to an interest arbitration proceeding?
To the other districts?
No.
I think in general.
Just in general, anybody that could be.
Right, because their grant funds.
Doesn't expose the city to.
Unlimited, grant funds on a limited term typically are excluded from inclusion in the ability to pay.
Be interesting to see what the other surrounding towns have done, besides 5 up and 5 down. I think New Haven County should be taken a look at, especially for life-size cities
But-
and towns.
Yes.
with
But I
the
think
same-
your question is a little different than that, right?
I had 2 things, so
Okay.
getting
It's
those.
adding to
So
it.
what I said is look at the 5
Yes.
municipalities above and below West Haven on the Anglic chart, which is a wealth chart. And also the contiguous communities, and of course with paid departments, right? Because the volunteers are getting this.
You're using terms I'm not familiar, I'm not a firefighter, so just so you're aware, you can educate me in this.
And my other thing was with regard to whether, because I would assume, and this is kind of looking at the overall financial picture, I mean, if I'm head of whatever union, I'm gonna say, hey, we weren't, the firefighters and police officers to a degree, as far as municipal employees, were kind of right there in your face, for lack of a better term, that I think the exposure was greater, but you might have some people say, well, we didn't maybe have $10,000 worth of exposure, but what about school nurses, things like that, who
Right.
may raise a claim. can those claims, because of the distribution of those funds, expose the city in a bargaining scenario? At interest arbitration to, one, make that argument, and two, can they be considered to be used for, as far as the overall wealth of the city when it comes out to paying? But even if they can't, would the payment itself be able to be brought up by another bar unit to say, hey, gave this to
Right,
these
you
guys?
gave,
What
this group of employees.
what about
in
us?
West Haven, yeah, what about us?
Yeah, and so,
And
you
it's
know,
all of them. It's the whole.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Right,
the
could be
interest, of
school
course,
employees,
Right.
could be.
and they can stop with their job if they did.
Anybody who was.
think that.
listen, as far as a union raising it, I would if I was a union president or somewhere else. Absolutely. I mean, so that's not even a question in my mind. The question is there real exposure there? And I don't know if there's things within the grant that would disallow that argument being made, but I think it requires a legal review by someone.
Kim, a related question. I know when we discussed the police, there was an issue that as a result of this kind of payment, that there would be an effect on retirees, that they would be entitled to something. Do we know that that is not the case here?
Question.
That is not the case here.
Okay.
You would have had to have served during a certain period, and you would have to still be on the rolls when the hazard pay is issued.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on that topic? Back to the brewery, and we are past our time.
We are past our time, and so I will be brief. Attorney Tiernan is otherwise occupied. The brewery, it is, there is some semantic language still being worked out on the contract because of some emergencies on their side and on our side, on the legal side. And with the knowledge that this would have to come back before the full MARB, they deferred completing that. The term sheet remains the same. It's just working on an agreement that everyone can feel comfortable.
Okay, so we're on hold with that.
We're on hold, but it will, they
See a
understand the deadline of the 29th, and they have committed to having a document for distribution far in advance of that.
Thank you. Okay, contract prior to the 29th. You have a question? No. We have MOA action plans included in our packet. I don't think we're going to go through those today. Or can we get an agree? Unless you wanted to do a very quick update, I'm thinking that we're going to table it and we're just going to look at the materials that we have been provided to us.
I can do 40 seconds. We do have IT, personnel.
Yep.
We have ARPA here as well.
Yes.
My quick update
Thank you.
is that some things have been delayed a little bit because of supply chain issues on the IT side. So we're working through that out of our control. Internally, we have some personnel issues. It's an employees market. So we've had some people leave and we've had trouble onboarding some additional resources here. But we're working with CCM now to assure that we are right pricing the positions so that we can actually bring in the top quality team that we need. A lot of the people here are those type of top quality people, and that is the mechanism that we want to continue. So we just need to make sure that we are appropriately spaced in the marketplace.
All right. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Curious to know, and this is directed to Julian as well as to Mr. Jackson, the outstanding request for confirmation of ethics compliance. I thought we were awaiting a list of who has complied and not complied, but also the universe of employees who are required to comply with the ethics disclosures. Have we received them?
We have received just what we've given to the members, so we have not received a complete list of all of the employees. We have only received the documents that they had on hand. And so we do not have a complete list of who is on staff and who we should be receiving them from. So we don't know how many are outstanding.
Right. So I underscore the interest of the committee in getting a comprehensive list of who is required to submit that. I
Which
do
is all
remember.
employees.
Okay, and because what we want to know is who has yet to comply,
Correct.
because that was a prominent issue in the forensic audit.
And we also asked for the city council as well. We asked for both parties and like ARPA, if they are playing a role in that ethics. I think we received the ARPA.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's easier to verify city council.
Yeah.
Because you can count how many you got back.
Mhm.
If they got all, and I'd have to go back through them and see.
But they should
Well,
be
with the-
providing that.
Right, it would be better if we had sort of
They
that
should be providing.
tabulation, but the other officials, it's because we don't know who's required, we can't really
Exactly.
determine compliance by just looking at.
So it is unfortunate that Attorney Tiernan is not here. I'd hope to direct this question to him. But if you would mind, I know this is outside of your lane, Mr. Jackson, but I would like a date certain when we can get that information. That's a long-standing and outstanding.
It is my understanding that in large measure, the request has been satisfied, but I can certainly try to get to, you don't believe so?
The request was for a list,
Oh.
who needs to submit and who did. Just a list, who did and who certified.
And what's outstanding?
And who, right, and so what was submitted a little while back was copies of forms. But again,
But you have access to the instant.
exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, okay.
We know based on the number of employees that we do not have enough.
And it shouldn't be this hard, Mr. Jackson. Because I think that once it just seems.
The
it's
lack
much
of
more difficult.
transparency
Yes,
is not helpful.
will only cast a harsher light on those who fail to disclose, is what I'm suggesting. It's taking way too long.
I will consult with Attorney Tiernan and ask that very simple question: who should, who did, who didn't?
Thank you.
Could that list include the person's position? Just so we know, if we're missing a bunch of clerks, but, we'd like to know at least the people in the government, what their position is. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last item on the, is any other business, if we have any.
If I may, I know there has been some concern about the city's market access. As we were in this meeting, we were selling notes. We were oversubscribed on those notes. And I'll have a final counting of that in about 2 hours.
How much did you sell?
6.5 million.
At 5?
I'll have to see.
So you'll give us the total interest cost for all the issues. Okay, great. Where that'll drive down the costs.
It will. If we oversubscribe, means the
Yeah.
cost goes down. Absolutely.
No other business?
Thank you.
Shall I get a motion for adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
I second.
Thank you. Vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. White?
Yes. Of course.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.